Let's build a normal type team where each team member is focused on boosting one stat each. This would make it a balanced normal type team across all 6 stats. Now I'm not only looking at the base stats, I will also take a look at the abilities, movesets and health items that can help increase these total stats even more. What's also important is the overall team synergy and making sure we have a good counter against Pokémon that normal types normally struggle against. For example, ghost or fighting type Pokémon. Now let's go over a quick checklist of what I can't use in this team. I'm not allowed to use legendaries, mythical, paradox or ultra beast Pokémon, because these Pokémon would always be on my team for their high base stats, which would be boring. And I also won't include any mega or gigantamax Pokémon for the same reason. With that said, let's go over some things that I can include. The moves I can use for the Pokémon are all their level up, TM and egg moves, and even some moves that were removed in the previous generations. Finally, I can give them any health items or abilities to give them the final boost they need for their total stats. My end goal is to build a team that is balanced in each stat to create a strong normal type team. And one more thing, I will be building the teams in a dual battle format, because this gives room for supportive Pokémon to shine as well. Let's get started with the physical attack focused Pokémon. Now the Pokémon that caught my eye here were a lot of bird Pokémons, which are great for a normal type team, since this is the best counter against the fighting type Pokémon. The Pokémon that I really liked were Braviary, Toucannon and Staraptor. They all have a really high attack base stat of 120 and above, so they are all great options. I ended up going with Braviary for one particular reason, and I will get to that in a minute after explaining the moveset. First I gave it 2 stab moves and I went with Brave Bird and Double Edge, which are 2 really strong stab moves that both deal a bit of recoil damage. Which is fine for this build since we have a lot of support Pokemon on the team that will be fighting alongside Braviary. For the third move I went with Close Combat, and this is here for type coverage against Steel and Rock type Pokemon, which normal types are normally dealing low damage against. For the final move I went with U-Turn, which is a very safe option if the opponent decides to switch to a hard counter like a Rock or Ice type Pokemon. And finally, here's the main reason I chose Braviary for this team, and that's the Defiant ability, which boosts the attack by 2 stages each time the opponent uses a stat lowering move on this Pokemon. Now combine this with a Choice Band and then we have a really strong attacker on the team. But you could switch it out for a Choice Scarf if you want Braviary to hit faster. I quickly want to mention Staraptor, which is way better in double teams compared to Braviary, because it has the Intimidate ability, which is broken in dual battles, especially if you combine it with the U-Turn move. It's also a lot faster than Braviary, but since we are building an attack focused Pokemon, Braviary is the better option for this team. The normal type has some good options for the special attackers like Drampa, Porygon C, Arboliva or Hisuian Zoroark. All of these are great picks with a very high special attack base stat, but for this team I decided to go with Porygon C, which has a very versatile moveset and an ability that can boost attacks a lot, just like Braviary. I give this Pokemon 2 stat boosting moves. The first one is Agility, which boosts the speed stat by 2 stages, and I also gave it Nasty Plot, which boosts the special attack by 2 stages. I know this Pokemon isn't focused on the speed stat, but a lot of Pokemon in this team have a low or mediocre speed stat, so having agility here will help out Porygon C a lot. Anyways, moving on to the next move, we got Tree Attack, which is not only a stab move, but also gives the opponent a 20% chance to get one of these status conditions, which are paralyzed, burned or frozen. Finally, I gave it the coverage move, Flash Cannon, a steel type move that has a small chance to lower the opponent's special defense stat. And finally, to make the stab move even more powerful, I went with the ability Adaptability, which boosts all stab moves by 50%. Finally, I give this Pokemon the item Wise Glasses, making it a fast and dangerous special attacker. It was pretty easy to pick a fast Pokemon since Cyclizar stood out from the rest with its 121 speed stat. And it also has the secondary Dragon typing, of course. It also has a very flexible moveset that can control the flow of the game. For the first move I went with U-Turn, which is a great move for a faster Pokemon like Cyclizar, to get out of dangerous matchups, since this Pokemon has a couple of weaknesses that are common like Fairy, Dragon and Fighting types. Next I gave it the dark type move knockoff, which deals double damage if the opponent has an held item. And it will also remove that item from the opponent's hand. This is easily one of the best moves to control the momentum of the game, especially on a fast Pokemon that can snatch an overpowered item like a Choice Band for example. Third I gave it the move Body Slam, which is both a stab and control move since it has a 30% chance to give the opponent the paralyzed status condition. A very effective move for stopping the fighting type Pokemon. For the final move I gave it the move Dragon Claw, which is a great choice if you need a strong stab move that can deal effective damage without taking direct stat nerfs. For the ability I went with Regenerator, which heals 1/3 of its max HP, and this is perfect for a fast Pokemon that has a control role on the team. Cyclozar's main goal is snatching the items and giving opponent the paralyzed status condition. After that you could switch to another Pokemon that can finish the job. And finally for the health item I gave it the Heavy Duty Boots, which makes it immune to moves like Spikes and Stealth Rock, which is normally a direct counter to this Pokemon that likes to switch in and out from the battlefield. For both the defense and special defense based stats, the normal type Pokemon are on the lowest end of all types. But there's one defensive Pokemon that really stands out here, and that's Dugwool. Now the defense base stat is mid at first, however I quickly want to mention the ability that completely changes everything. And that's the Fluffy ability, which reduces the damage from all physical moves by 50%, which boosts its mediocre defense stat all the way to a 150 defensive base stat. However, with this ability it also does take double damage from fire type moves, so keep that in mind. Now let's go over the moves. For the first one we got an obvious choice, and that's Cotton Guard, which boosts the defense stat by 3 full stages. After using this move, almost any physical attacker is going to have a difficult time getting Dugwool off the field. Next is Body Press, which deals more damage depending on the user's defense stat. And now of course this is the perfect Pokemon for this move, because after using Cotton Guard for 2 times you basically have your defense stat maxed out. And after that this move can do some great damage. After that I wanted to give a crowd control move and some type coverage. So I went with Zen Headbutt, which has a 20% chance to flinch the opponent. Now the speed stat on Dugwool is not that high, but it can still work wonders against slower Pokemon. And while even if it moves less, it's still a nice coverage move to have against fighting types. For the last move I went with Protect, which is one of the best moves in duel battles. This way Dugwool has a way to protect itself from dangerous moves like Solar Beam. Finally I gave it the item Shell Bell, which is not the best item for this Pokemon because I think leftovers would work better, but I have another Pokemon that needs the leftovers item more. You see, when I started making this video, the first Pokemon I added to the team was Blissey, because we all know this meme in the Generation 4 games where it takes multiple years before Blissey's HP reaches 0, so Blissey was obviously gonna be my go-to pick for the HP stat Pokemon. But I had a really hard time finding a good special defense focused Pokemon that has a good synergy with the rest of the team. The normal types are known for their poor defensive stats compared to other types, so the only Pokemon that have a focus on their special defense stats are Kecleon and Oranguru. But then I noticed that Blissey also has the highest special defense stat of any normal type Pokemon. So I decided to assign Blissey to the special defense and HP stat at the same time. This Pokemon has the role of a self-healing tank that also supports the team at the same time, making both the HP and special defense stats shine at the same time. And then for the final Pokemon I did something special, which I will cover after Blissey. Now for the first move I went with Wish. After you use this move you can heal on the next turn. But if you also want to heal allies on the field, you can switch it out for moves like Heal Pulse or Life Duel. But I decided to make this Pokemon a self-healing tank, of course. However, for the next move I gave it something that will help out the entire team. And that's the move Heal Bell, which removes all the status conditions from the entire party, which is good for a team like this where Pokemon are being switched in and out all the time by the move U-turn. Next I gave it the move Protect, which is a great move for multiple team members on the team, especially the supportive Pokemon. Finally I gave it the fairy move Alluring Voice, which can be handy if the opponent team uses a lot of stat boosting moves like Sword Dance or Agility for example. This move will confuse the target after it had a stat boost that turn, and since Blissey is a slower Pokemon that means the opponent has a higher chance of moving first. And for the ability I went with Natural Cure, which removes all the status conditions from the user when switching out. And this is mainly here if Blissey gets the sleep status condition. Finally I gave it the leftovers first item, I wanted to give this item to double as well, but normally you're not allowed to use the same item for multiple team members, so I decided to go with that rule. Now for the final Pokemon, I decided to add a Pokemon that can counter ghost types well, and that's Hisuian Zoroark. Another reason I added this Pokemon is because it has a great speed stat, which is pretty low or mediocre across most of this team. Also for this Pokemon I will cover multiple moves so you can choose and decide what you need the most against the opposing team. For the first moves, you could go with Sword Dance, Nasty Plot or Agility. All of these moves boost a particular stat by 2 stages, which is great if you want to go for a specific build on this Pokemon. Anyways, I decided to go with Agility for this build just in case the opponent has any moves that can lower the speed stat. Next we go for a ghost type stab move. You can either pick Shadow Ball or Poltergeist, depending if you previously chose Sword Dance or Nasty Plot on your moveset. Personally I chose Shadow Ball for this team since the special attack is already pretty high on this Pokemon, even without any stat buffs. Next I want to give it one coverage move. Options like Low Kick, Flamethrower or Aerial Ace are all great options depending on what you prefer the most. I decided to go with Flamethrower since Braviary and Cyclozar are both weak to the Ice type moves, and I want more coverage for that weakness. Lastly, I want to give it a strong normal type stab move like Hyper Voice that can hit both opponents at the same time and deal some good damage. I quickly want to mention to avoid moves like Hyper Beam or Giga Impact, since the recharge time on those moves are way too risky on a glass cannon like Hisuian Zoroark, especially in duel battles, which makes it an easy target if this move misses or fails to feint the opponent. This Pokemon only has one ability that has the name Illusion, and this might be the most perfect team for this ability. Let me explain. It takes the form of the last Pokemon in your current party. For example, if Blissey is the last Pokemon in the party, it will spawn on the field as a Blissey. And it's great for tricking the opponent and using a fighting type move, which this Pokemon is fully immune against, making the opponent waste a full turn, plus it won't break the illusion, since this effect only goes away from a direct hit. This Pokemon has a trickster role on the team that confuses the opponent and punishes them for making mistakes. Finally, I gave it the Life Orb, which boosts the damage of all moves, but it will lose a bit of HP each turn, which is fine, since it's a glass cannon anyways. And finally, here's the full team. Let me know in the comments if you would make any changes to the team. There are still a lot of amazing options you can pick after all. If you guys want to see a similar video like this, let me know in the comments, and I will let you guys decide which Pokemon type we are going to make a balanced team for next. Well, thanks for watching until the end and have an amazing day.